When the ships finally returned, 3 years late, the fort was empty. More than 100 men, women and children had been left on that island, an entire English colony, the first of its kind in the New World. Now, there was no smoke from any fire, no voices, no bodies, no sign of a struggle, only the wind moving through the trees and a wall of tall wooden posts the settlers had built around a place they had already abandoned, and carved into one of those posts a single word. No message, no explanation, just 7 letters, cut cleanly into the wood by someone who knew they might never be found, pointing perhaps to where 100 people had vanished. This is the story of the Lost Colony of Roanoke. In the summer of 1587, England was still a newcomer to the New World. Spain had gold and empires to the south. England had ambition, a queen who wanted a foothold in North America, and a coastline it barely understood. The plan was to plant a permanent colony, not a fort of soldiers, but families, men, women, and children who would build homes, farm the land, and make the wilderness English. More than 100 colonists sailed under a governor named John White. He was an artist and a leader, and he had more than duty binding him to the venture. His own daughter was among the settlers, and she was pregnant. On that island, she would give birth to a granddaughter he adored, a child named Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. They landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. It was not the place they had intended to settle, but their pilot refused to carry them further, and so Roanoke it was. An earlier English expedition had already tried and failed here. The bones of that failure were still on the island, and so was the memory of it among the native people, who had good reason not to trust the newcomers. From the very first days, the colony was in trouble. Relations with the surrounding tribes had already been poisoned by the earlier expedition, which had answered a minor dispute with violence and burned a village. Now the settlers found themselves surrounded by people who remembered that betrayal. One of the colonists was killed while out gathering crabs, alone, not long after they arrived. The message was clear. They were not welcome, and they were not safe. They had come too late in the year to plant proper crops. Supplies were thin. Winter was coming, and it became obvious very quickly that the colony could not survive without more support from England. So the colonists made a decision that would haunt everyone involved. They asked their governor, John White, to sail back across the Atlantic himself, to argue their case in person and return with ships full of food and settlers and supplies. White did not want to go. He knew how it would look, a leader abandoning his own people, his own daughter, his newborn granddaughter. But he was the only one with a standing to command a relief fleet. Reluctantly, he agreed. Before he left, the colonists made him a promise. If they moved on from Roanoke while he was gone, and they expected they might, they would carve their destination into a tree or a post so he could follow them. And if they left in distress, under attack, they would add a cross above the name, a signal of danger. With that agreement, White boarded the ship and sailed for England, believing he would be back within months. He would not set foot on that island again for 3 long years. What happened next was not treachery, but history. White reached England in late 1587, and almost at once the country was swallowed by a far greater crisis. Spain was assembling the largest invasion fleet the world had ever seen. The Spanish Armada, and every seaworthy English vessel was seized for the defense of the realm. There were no ships to spare for 100 colonists on the far side of the ocean. White fought for years to get back. He begged, he petitioned, he waited. Twice he managed to secure small vessels, only to have the voyages fail. Once, when the crews turned to piracy instead and were themselves attacked and looted and forced to limp home. Every delay was another season the colony spent alone, unrelieved, running out of everything. Finally, in August of 1590, 3 years after he had left, John White stepped ashore on Roanoke Island once more. It was, by grim coincidence, the 3rd birthday of his granddaughter, Virginia Dare. He had every reason to hope and every reason to fear. What he found was silence. The houses had been taken down, not burned, not smashed, but dismantled, as though the people had left in an orderly way and taken what they could carry. In their place stood a strong palisade of tree trunks, a defensive wall built after he had gone. The settlement had become a fort, and then it had been emptied. There were no bodies, no graves that he could find, no bones, no sign of a battle, no scattered belongings, no evidence of fire or slaughter. It was not the aftermath of a massacre. It was simply absence, as if 100 people had folded up their lives and walked into the trees. And then White saw the word. On one of the great posts of the palisade, someone had carved in fair capital letters the single word CROATOAN, and on a nearby tree, carved into the bark, 3 more letters, CRO, as if begun in haste and left unfinished. To White, the meaning was not a mystery at all. It was hope. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island to the south, and the name of the friendly people who lived there, a tribe the colonists trusted, led by a man who had actually traveled to England and back. This was the agreed signal. The colonists had told him where they were going. They had followed the plan, and crucially, there was no cross carved above the name, no mark of distress. By their own code, that meant they had not left under attack. They had moved on deliberately to shelter with people who might feed and protect them. White was overjoyed. His people were alive. He knew where they had gone. All he had to do was sail a short distance south to CROATOAN Island, and he would find them. He never got the chance. A storm was rising as he prepared to make the crossing. The weather turned savage. His ships lost anchors, took damage, and the captains, exhausted, low on supplies, and unwilling to risk their vessels, refused to linger. Against everything in him, John White was carried back out to sea, away from the island where his family was waiting, without ever reaching CROATOAN. He was forced to return to England. He never obtained another ship. He never saw his daughter or his granddaughter again, and he died some years later, an old man, not knowing what had become of the people he had left behind. And so the colonists slipped out of history, leaving behind only that one carved word. What actually happened to them has been argued over for more than 4 centuries. The word on the post points one way, that the settlers, abandoned and starving, integrated with the CROATOAN people to the south and were absorbed into their community, that they did not die, but simply became something other than English. For generations, there were reports that seemed to support this. Later explorers and colonists heard stories of native people further inland with gray eyes, with fair hair, who could work with metal or read, who spoke of ancestors that came from a distant land. Some tribes carried oral traditions of white settlers who had joined them long ago. None of it is proof, but all of it whispers the same possibility, that the lost colonists were never truly lost, only changed. Other explanations are darker. Perhaps disease or starvation killed many, and the survivors scattered among several tribes. Perhaps some were killed after all, in a conflict that left no trace White could find. Perhaps small groups tried to sail back toward England in a small vessel they had kept and were swallowed by the Atlantic. The land itself keeps its secrets. The original site has been reshaped by centuries of erosion, and much of what the colonists left may now lie underwater or under sand. Modern archaeology has offered tantalizing fragments, English artifacts found at native sites both to the south and to the west, hinting that the colony may not have gone to one place, but split and dispersed in more than one direction. Pieces of a puzzle with no picture on the box, but the heart of the mystery remains exactly where John White found it: an empty fort, no bodies, no blood, in one word, carved with care into a post by someone who wanted very much to be followed and never was. We tell this story as a mystery, and it is one. But underneath the mystery, there is something quieter and sadder. A grandfather who left his family for what he thought would be a few months and was kept away by war and storm for 3 years. A message carved in hope into hard wood so it would last. A message that worked, that was read, that was understood, and still could not reach the person it was meant to save. The tragedy of Roanoke is not only that 100 people vanished, it is that they told us where they were going, and we still could not bring them home. Somewhere out there, perhaps, their blood still runs, carried down through the very people they came to conquer, folded quietly into a land that swallowed the border between the two. They left us one word, and in the end, one word was not enough.